All right, guys, good afternoon. My name is Shad. I am your host, and welcome to Tales from the Cryptid, the only show on Ram Radio where we talk about things in a little bit of a more manic way. I'm here with our guest. If you want to introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Princesa Martinez. I work here for Ram Radio. I'm the social media manager this semester.
Yeah. All right. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. What's your major? How long have you been here at ASU? Like little stuff like that.
I'm a junior. I'm a communications major and a gender studies minor.
Hmm.
Um, anything?
How long have you been here at ASU? Like, have you been here all 3 years, or is it
Yes, all
just
3 years.
wow? So
Yeah.
that makes two people. Most people that I know that are juniors are actually like dual credit
Mhm.
people, which
Yeah.
is really it makes their schedule so funny to me.
Mhm.
But anyways, how do you know what a cryptid is?
Yes, I love like little stories like that.
Awesome, that's really great. You'll be wonderful here. For those of you who don't know at home what a cryptid is, cryptids are creatures or monsters or anything mythological or something that's not proven to be true by science or anything scientific in that any way, shape, or form. But people have stories about them. People believe that they exist essentially. So like dragons, vampires, werewolves, leprechauns, anything that people have claimed are real but we haven't been able to prove can be classified as a cryptid at some point in time. And for a good example of a cryptid that actually became real, platypus. A platypus was something that people didn't believe in because who would? They're kind of crazy. But eventually we did figure them out. So who knows? Maybe we'll find out one cryptid one day on this show.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
anyway, so the
We'll keep
cryptid
you
that
updated.
maybe. But the cryptid I want to talk about today with you is a cryptid that you say that you have personal stories with. So this should be really interesting. It is La Lechuza. Now, do you want to tell us a little
Yes.
bit about La Lechuza? Maybe like some little like what the name means and like maybe where it came from and like how long it's been a thing.
Well, me personally, I don't like know too much about it. I know it's like a witch that like shapeshifts into an owl. And there's like this whole thing in like Mexican culture where you can't like see like an owl without it being like a bad omen. So I find that really interesting, and it's also funny because my mom's favorite animal is like owls, and we have them like all over our house. So I'm like, maybe that's why we have bad luck.
You're like, Mom, you're doing this to
Yeah,
yourself.
come on now. For like history, I know it's like maybe a little younger than like La Llorona.
Yeah.
I
So,
feel kind of I don't know when it was like established.
but it's safe to say that it's been at least a
Yeah.
good couple 100 years at
Yes, for
least.
sure.
So I actually looked into La Lechuza myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I found some really interesting history on La Lechuza. The term does mean like the owl witch
Mm-hmm.
or the witch owl or however you want to say it. But essentially, long ago, in somewhere in Mexico, I can't exactly remember where, but the story goes that she lived in a really quaint small village, and she kind of lived on the outskirt of town by herself. She didn't have anyone with her, and that kind of already gave a bad start for her. The village kind of was already suspicious
Mm-hmm.
of her, and one day during this village, a little boy disappears. People don't know where he went. They never see him again. And so they start suspecting it could have been her. I'm not sure if they do anything then, but I do know that later on they start finding out she's getting into witchcraft. They didn't really like that, so they murder her. As any normally rational person would do in like 400 years ago,
Yeah,
right? So
the norm.
it was the thing back then. It was the it. But essentially after they kill her on us like assuming she's a witch and like she did all of that bad stuff, this is kind of where it branches off. Some people believe that she, because of her witchcraft and spells that she did, she was able to come back as a spirit of vengeance,
Mm-hmm.
and she took revenge on the people that did that to her, and that's how she got the ability to kind of like shape shift between like a girl or like a woman and that like owl hybrid monster.
Mm-hmm.
Other stories claim that she used the witchcraft to get into contact with the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And ooh, and because of that, she sold her soul to him, and that's why she can kind of do that. Because as most people know, the devil is like very well established that it can like shapeshift into different animals, like
Yeah.
the serpent in the garden and all that fun stuff. So, my question is, what do you think happened? Which one, if you had to guess, would you more firmly believe? Do you think she sold her soul to the devil? Do you think it was her witchcraft? Do you think it could have been something else?
For me, I think because like thinking about like the timeline, I think it was probably more of vengeful type of spirit that she came back like that. Because like just like imagine you just get like killed like that just like randomly, and you can like have the power to come back, and
Yeah,
you come
yeah.
back as an owl. So I think that's kind of cool. But yeah, still like what she did was not cool if she did do that.
Yeah. And speaking of what she did, there are also reported sightings and how she attacks people. Essentially, she has the ability to like mimic a crying child, like a baby or infant that's like crying, and she'll usually use that in the middle of the night. And just similar to like the Wendigo, how they imitate other people's voices, or they imitate things they've heard. She does that to lure people in, to get them to investigate in the middle of the night where nobody will see them, nobody will hear them, and she grabs them. She picks them up, flies them off to her nest, and supposedly just eats them, right? So that's really scary to think of,
Yeah.
right? Like imagine hearing a child cry and you go and investigate, and then you see this like 5 foot tall owl just pick you up by like your shoulders and carry you off. You're like,
Yeah.
well, this is my life now. How scared would you be on a scale of 1 to 10 if that happened to you?
Probably like a good 9.
A good night.
Yeah.
This isn't the scariest thing that's happened to me, but it is pretty close.
Yeah.
It doesn't compare to that one time in middle school when I had to speak in front of the whole crowd.
Yeah,
That
literally.
was- you're like, I wanted to die back then. So, I have a little question for you. There have also been other theories about La Lechuza, of course, and some people say that she could be a skinwalker. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that skinwalkers are also kind of in this little North American
Yeah.
pathway, so it is possible, right? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't think that's like too far off. Especially, I think like her being like a whole witch, like her being like an indigenous woman would probably like be super more closely related to that. So it's not like super far off from the idea that she could be like a skinwalker.
Yeah, and on the topic of skinwalkers, they have very similar abilities because both of them are able to turn into different animals and like shapeshift.
Yeah.
The only difference is that in the La Lechuza story, it's just something that she can do, whereas with skinwalkers, they have to have like the pelt of whatever animal they
Yeah.
have. So like if they wanted to turn into a wolf, they'd have to have a pelt of a wolf and a good chunk of it too. Whereas we don't really know if that's the same thing with La Lechuza. So it's very different. It's very interesting. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
We'll probably never be able to figure that out. But as far as we're aware, we classify them as two completely different things. So now we get into the fun part, ladies and gentlemen. Princesa here says that she has a couple of stories about this. So if you want to go ahead and get into those, you can.
Well, they're not like my stories that I experienced personally, but my cousin, I was like in Mexico, right? It was like in the middle of the night, so of course we had to tell like scary stories. And she's like, yeah, so when I was little, there was like this time, it was like consecutive like nights that it happened where she was like, I think probably no more than 5. And she kind of like, it's like in the middle of the night, my aunt and uncle are going to sleep. Well, they are asleep. And she's like in the living room, and she ends up hearing like a knock on the window and the door.
Ooh.
Yeah, in like middle of the night, it's like windy. And then she was like, okay. She's like, she's a little girl. She doesn't really know anything. So she kind of ignores it, and she keeps hearing it.
Yeah, it's
And-
like it's starting to get more like
Yeah.
insistent.
And then it kind of just like stops. Then it happens again like for a couple nights, and one of the nights she goes up to like the window and sees like kind of like something tapping on the window, and it was like all dark. There was like no lights on, right? So she ends up like looking through the window, and she still hears like those knocking sounds.
Yeah.
And then briefly she like sees like a glimpse of like the owl, and she's like, oh. Then you can like kind of hear like screeching and like what you were saying, like the kid sounds. And she had run to my aunt and uncle's room to wake them up and tell them about that. And they were like, oh, that's like blah, blah, blah. So they
Yeah.
explained what La Lechuza was. So I thought that was like kind of creepy. I was like, and it happened in the same house where I was staying that night. I was like, oh,
You're like, so you tell me this now.
yeah, like
You didn't
I'm
like
actually
tell me
gonna go to sleep.
beforehand.
This is so fun. Thanks. I'm gonna stay up all night.
That reminds me of like me telling my friends about like a ghost interaction that I had. And I was like, honestly, it might be following me. And my roommate was like, oh, great. Wonderful thing to tell me at this point.
Yeah.
So that's the first story. Do you have a second story? Because I know you just say you have two.
Um, Mine's like a little shorter. I think it's like from my grandma. It was like when she was younger. With my one of my aunts, that they were like babies. So like in the crib, she was like doing something. She was like home alone, cause my grandpa would come to the States and work here so she would like be alone. And so when one of my aunts was like a baby, she would like be in the crib, right, or like on the bed or something. And it was late at night, and she could like start hearing those noises like before. You could like the scratching, the tapping, like the screeching of like an owl. And then she kind of just like kind of ignores it. It's like maybe it's like whatever, like an animal or something.
Yeah, like it's just something outside.
Yeah. And then she's like, okay. Then she starts hearing like crying, and like the crib is like kind of next to a window. And she's like, okay. And then like the noise starts moving towards where like one of my aunts was sleeping. And she goes into the room, and she sees like the figure of an owl kind of like to the side by a tree, because she went to go look out through the window. She was like, oh. So she took my aunt from there, and she was like, okay, so let's not do that.
I love how nonchalant you make your grandma sound.
Yeah.
Like she sees this cryptid that's known for like terrorizing
Yeah.
Mexico, and she just goes, "Oh."
My mom, not my mom, my grandma, she has like another story from like there's like this whole different thing. It's called like what is it? It's like the devil would like come to like a club or something like way back forever ago, probably like in the 70s, I don't know. And he would go to like the prettiest woman at the like bar, the club, whatever. And he would like ask her to dance, and the people would say like, yeah, he was like super attractive. But then there were like start being like kind of like smoke in the room, like on the floor, and people would start seeing like his legs, and they were like goat legs, right?
Yeah.
And then he would like kind of just like randomly disappear, and like the next day the girl would have like kind of like burn marks on her where like they were dancing, so like kind of like on her waist, like on her hands, on her arms. So that's like super interesting story that she experienced. I was like, okay.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for telling these stories.
Mm-hmm.
They do sound like pretty plausible in terms of stories I've also seen and heard about from La Lechuza. I remember one story particularly about someone also like taking care of a baby in a crib, or like they just had a little child with them,
Yeah.
and they hear these sounds of like a infant crying, and they start trying to look for him, and they go outside. They don't find anything, and when they come back, their kid's gone.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like when you
I've
started
heard stories like that. Yeah.
when you started saying that like scared me. I was about to be like, did your grandma like actually lose a child?
No, thankfully she did it.
Yeah, it's a good thing she did. That would have changed the rating on this a lot
Yeah.
quicker. But so now that we've told about stories, I just want to go into the next question, which is kind of along the lines of, what do you think about La Lechuza? Do you think she's real? Do you think she's fake? Do you think there's like anything that she could be, but she's not really, like just La Lechuza?
I honestly do think she's like a witch if she were to be real. I don't know, like completely know, like if I believe in it, but I find it really interesting to like, um, kind of like it relating back to like La Llorona in like a sense. But honestly, I don't think like 100% I would believe in it. Kind of like maybe 50 on it.
Flip a coin. That's how you feel
Yeah,
that day.
I guess. I believe today.
Yeah, that's fair. I personally, as someone who is very open minded when it comes to things like this, it's very hard for me to just absolutely say that's not real. That thing didn't exist. Especially when you have such a massive group of people all having similar stories and all pretty much saying, yeah, this thing happened to me. It's real.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of part of the reason why so many different cryptids are always talked about, like the Wendigo, Bigfoot, vampires. People have always kind of believed that they were real, and from dating it back as far as possible as we can, we still find like stories about these things existing. So it's very hard to just deny that it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
My next question for you is that if you had to choose between La Llorona and La Lechuza, which for you don't know who La Llorona is, she is the crying woman, pretty similar to La Lechuza, except if you see her, it's kind of already too late because she'll like grab you and then take you to a lake and drown you.
Yeah.
Just normal things that go on in Mexico.
Yeah.
If you had to choose, which one do you think is more impactful in Mexican culture, and which do you think is just scarier for you personally?
For sure, La Llorona is like more like culturally significant to Mexico for sure. But for me, I think I would be way more scared of La Lechuza because not only can it attack you like as a child, but like as a mother, your like child could be taken away, and that's like horrifying. Like you just don't know, and
Yeah.
you hear like a child screaming, but then your child's like not there, and your child's fine. Where something like that's kind of creepy.
Yeah, that I honestly don't know what I would do if my kid just disappeared. Even if he just like got up and walked to another room
Yeah.
or something. If he wasn't where I had or like I last saw him and something was weird going on, I would definitely freak out.
Yeah.
So I would say La Lechuza is probably more scary for me because I also would be terrified for my children.
Yeah.
I think I'm safe now. I think I'm too old. I'm too old for La Lechuza. So I just have one last question. So we talked about if you think La Lechuza was real or not, as the cryptid. I want to know if you think La Lechuza was real in terms of like an actual person, because a lot of cryptids and a lot of historical figures are related, right? So, for example, like vampires, you trail it back and you get to like Vlad Tepes of Wallachia, which is like
Yeah.
Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
Do you think La Lechuza was inspired by somebody, and do you think like the events actually happened?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think like it happened like she killed a kid or something. I
Yeah.
feel like a kid went missing and they wanted like a scapegoat. So it's like definitely one of those things that I feel she probably was like a single woman, like kind of living by herself, and like that time is kind of like frowned upon. So they used her as a scapegoat, and she probably was like a curandera or something like that. It's like kind of a witch, but not really, like a healer.
Yeah.
So they kind of just like blamed her again, the scapegoat type of thing.
Yeah, because their favorite pastime back then was
Yeah,
framing people as witches
yeah,
and
like
burning them.
you're a witch, literally.
You know, I actually learned about that the other day, and it was like they would tell somebody's a witch, or like be like, "You're a witch," and then the only way to get out of it would be to like claim somebody else was a witch, because then it was like, "Oh, you've changed. You're a better person now. You don't want to be a witch anymore." So like,
That's crazy.
yeah, I just imagine now just like a village of people just being like, "She's a witch. No, she's a witch. No, I saw her."
Yeah, no, that would be insane.
But yeah, so that's I think everything that we have that we wanted to talk about La Lechuza. Very interesting cryptid, very interesting story. I think the history on that is really impressive. And once again, while I believe that she's real, and you may or may not, ultimately it comes down to the audience whether or not they think that La Lechuza is real. So, to the people listening in at home, what do you guys think? Do you think she's real? Do you think she is just some type of exaggeration of a story that may have some historical truth? Are there any cryptids you want us to talk about next time? What cryptids would you like us to talk about the most? What cryptids do you not want us to talk about? Just let us know in the comments. Once again, thank you very much for listening in to Tales from the Cryptid. My name is Shad.
My name is Princesa.
And we will see you guys on the next episode. Take care.